Are the Chicago Bulls finally ready to move on from their troubled forward Patrick Williams? Well, according to Joe Cowley, the Bulls are finally open and putting Patrick Williams on the trade block to see what they can get back as soon as this trade deadline. We're going to talk about it all and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, hosted by Haize, your number one spot for all things Chicago Bulls.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today. So this one comes from the Chicago Sun-Times saying this. As source told the Sun-Times that Karnishova finally has bought in to the idea that 23-year-old Patrick Williams needs a change of scenery, opening the door for him to be on the trade block too. This is a major shift for the Chicago Bulls, which just gave Patrick Williams a contract extension in this prior offseason. But the Bulls have been very reluctant in the past to move on from Patrick Williams due to the potential that still lays in the 23-year-old forward. But the Bulls, in trying to find a better balance of the roster, trying to clear out some of the roster, seem to now be more open than ever to moving on from Patrick Williams. Now, will this mean that the Bulls are going to move him leading into the trade deadline? That remains to be seen. The Bulls have shot players before. Doesn't mean that anybody's going to bite, but the potential that Patrick Williams offers, and not only a 3-and-D player, but still with the youth that he has, I can see a team being in on Patrick Williams. If I was the Bulls, and this is the speculative part of it, if I was the Bulls, I'm calling the Spurs immediately and asking the Spurs, what would you be willing? How can Patrick Williams help you remove the restrictions? We can guarantee the pick to you next year. That's what I would do if I was the Chicago Bulls. I'd be open to moving Patrick Williams to the San Antonio Spurs and tell them we'll remove the restrictions. You get the pick next year in 2026, regardless of where it sits. Just let us have the pick in 2025. Not to say that that's going to be something that's going to get done, but that would be the first call that I would make. If I'm open to moving Patrick Williams, the first team I'm calling is the Spurs. Not only do the Spurs have a developmental system, they have a nice, other young talent to match salaries of Patrick Williams, but they also have something that we want. And they have that 2025 pick, which is top 10 protected right now. If the Bulls can get the Spurs to remove the protections on that pick, to me, that makes it worth it. That makes it worth it. Not only that, you open up minutes for Julian Phillips, you open up minutes for Manas Busilis, of course. That's the first call I'm making. If that does not work out, then I'm going to see what the best offers out on the market. But the first team that I'm calling, if I'm the Chicago Bulls, is the San Antonio Spurs to see if there's any interest in Patrick Williams. They just got to match the salary, and then at that point, just remove the protections on 2025. We'll remove the protections in 2026. You get the pick no matter what happens with us. I think that benefits both teams. The Spurs get a nice young talent back. The Bulls then get their 2025 pick in a very deep draft, and the Spurs get the 2026 pick, which is also in a very deep draft, meaning that even if the Bulls somehow fail and torpedo, they get that pick regardless. I feel that is a very fair deal for both sides in this. Not to say that the Spurs are necessarily going to bite, but that would be my first call. That would be my first call when it comes down to it. So we'll see what happens. I doubt that that's the deal, but this adds in again on the flip side of this. This is now once again Arturas Karnishova moving on from a player after giving him a contract extension. Keep in mind, the Washington Wizards were at one point in time offered the Chicago Bulls a first and 2 seconds for Patrick Williams. The Bulls gave him a contract extension. Same thing happened with Zach LaVine. The New York Knicks offered a trade that I think we got 2 first-round picks back. They gave him a contract extension and then tried to move him a year later, right? So this is the Bulls, again, being a year behind everything, but they do hit a change of heart. And reportedly in this as well is that the Bulls coaching staff has been trying to unlock Patrick Williams' potential for years. And while he has had setbacks with injury, Patrick Williams hasn't been easy to work with. This is the first time that we've heard that P. Will may not be easy to work with. Again, with everything, take everything with a grain of salt from any source, especially the Chicago Sun-Times and Joe Cowley. But it's interesting enough. It also seems like Peter Patton, once he stepped in to take over duties for developing Patrick Williams, feels like it's extremely tough to work with Patrick Williams. And if Peter Patton, if you trust him as your head of player development, and he has that mindset, I mean, hey, and I like the fact that it's worded in here that they feel like a change of scenery is needed for P. Will. So it's still not that AK is saying, hey, P. Will's trash, he's garbage, he's hopeless. It's just that it seems like Arturis is coming to the realization that P. Will may just need to go to a different place to really, really try to unlock him. So overall, like I said, this news is, I won't necessarily call it shocking. I won't say that it's shocking. I just think that it's once again the Bulls kind of realizing things a little bit behind where everybody else has realized them. I think that that's a big part in this as well. We got Jordan in the building, says about damn time. A lot of people going to say that. Mikhail in the building, what's going on, fam? Top Ice Cube Gaming, what's going on, fam? Should have never signed him to the current contract. Well, you're not going to let him go for that. Well, keep in mind, if the Bulls are willing, if the Bulls do get something back for him, no, they should have signed him. Because if you would have let him go for nothing, you wouldn't have got nothing back. So the Bulls are able to move him at this trade deadline and get something back. It's probably, yes, it sucked, but it probably in the long run was better that they re-signed him. That's why you always typically see teams re-sign young players, because if you're able to flip them, if you can convince any team to bite on their potential, it ends up being worth it, even if it's frustrating initially at first. And that's what the Bulls may be able to get in this. We'll see, right? Modest time coming up. Let's hope so. What's going on, Jacob Capone? Don, glad to have you in the building. Good, he can develop, and I believe that too. I do think that P. Will can still develop in another place. I do think he can do that. Ain't nobody taking that and giving us nothing valuable back for it. So you might as well try next year and hope for the best, because this year ain't nobody going to want him. Listen, if you just listen to what I laid out, I'm not necessarily. Listen, I'm not saying that the Bulls are going to get something great back, but they can get something back for him. Not a fan trading Patrick Williams. Still young, still has 3-and-D potential. Yeah, but the problem is his three-point shooting has gotten worse. His defense has gotten considerably worse. These things have gotten considerably worse for him this season. So, if it slides again, then you can get into an area where that value just isn't there. They give him cash, now trying to move him. I agree with this work. Yeah, hey, it is what it is. Let's go. Ready for Patrick Williams to move on. He does need a change, and send him to the right there. I agree with you, bro. Right there with you. That's the first call I'm making. If the Bulls have truly gotten to the point where they're saying, let's trade P. Will, the very first call I'm making is to the Spurs and seeing what business can we do. How can we make this work to where you remove the restrictions on the 2025 draft pick, you get P. Will, and we'll give you the 2026 pick outright. That's the first call that I'm making there. Would you trade? Oh, absolutely. I trade P. Will for Devin Vassell. Now, I will say that still presents some lineup matchup issues, but if the Spurs are willing for that, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Who the hell is going to want P. Will? I can score 7 points on 3 of 11 shooting with 2 rebounds. No, you can't. Not at the NBA level. You wouldn't be able to do shit. Don't forget, the Bulls don't get a lot of respect around the league. I'm sure there are a couple of coaches, organizations that think they can do better for him. Oh, I have no doubt that there's at least one organization that looks at P. Will and says, we can get so much better out of him than what the Bulls are. But that also does not mean that they're willing to match whatever value the Bulls see, right? So a team can look at a P. Will and say, listen, our staff can do so much better with P. Will. That still doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be willing to pull the trigger on a move for him. So just because some interest may not, or a deal does not get done, that doesn't necessarily mean that the interest isn't there. It's a tightrope that you got to walk there. So, we'll see. A team would definitely take him because they're going to think they can fix him. I bet he start playing this natural position with a new team, LOL, and power forward when it's small ball time. Again, the whole natural position shit is not real in the not modern NBA. It's just not real in the modern NBA. I think it's more that if a coach actually invests in development, meaning, P. Will, you're about to get 15 shots a night. I think that's the part. Regardless of the position, I've gone over the numbers before. P. Will's production is basically the exact same at small forward, power forward, or coming off the bench. It's the same. That's part of the reason why it's so frustrating, right? But I think that some way that P. Will and some players do need to develop this way is that they develop with opportunity. So I do think that if a team like whatever, let's say the Brooklyn Nets, for example, right? Because they're moving off a lot of their pieces. And I'm not saying who the Bulls can get back, but let's say, the Brooklyn Nets are in a place where they're going to be tanking for the next 3 years. They get P. Will and they say, hey, P. Will, 15 to 18 shots a night. There you go. I think that P. Will could probably develop in that. Yeah, if a highly respected player development coach like Peter Patton can't get him going, it's time to move on from him. Yeah, I mean, I can't knock that at all. I can't knock that at all. Can't knock that thinking at all. Send his contract out for a bunch of small ones that are easily broken. You can't do that. We don't have the open roster spots to get a bunch of contracts back. We only can do 1-for-1 trades, 2-for-2 trades, 3-for-3 trades. So we don't have that. If your first call is to the Spurs, who's your second call to? Great question. This is a long shot, and it's probably not going to happen. I want to be clear. I'm not saying that this is going to happen. My second call, but only because of how many picks that they have and how they are a young team. But then again, they're young and towards the top of their. I would call the Houston Rockets. I'd call the Memphis Grizzlies. I'd call the Dallas Mavericks. Trying to think of else teams that. Nets. I just mentioned the Nets. I'd call the Nets as well, and probably the Portland Trailblazers. I'll call the Portland Trailblazers too because they're stupid. I'll call the Portland Trailblazers too. You're probably not going to do that digital custom because then you're getting into $40 million worth of contracts, and that's more difficult for teams to match. So you're probably not going to combine those two contracts because it's about $39 million at that point in time. P. Will for Ben Simmons. No, I'm good on that. I'm good on that one. I'm actually really good on that one. I don't want Ben Simmons on this team at all. I'm just going to be 100% honest with you on that one. P. Will is lazy. That's why Patton can't work with him. Listen, I mean, that is a bit eye-opening. I won't lie to you. Now, again, like I said with everything, take it with a grain of salt because this is Joe Cowley reporting this. But if a guy like Peter Patton, who's a development, that's literally his only job is developing, meaning that he sees and works with, and over his career, now, of course, he works just for the Bulls, but over his time of developing players, he's seen everybody come in and out of his building. If a guy like Peter Patton looks at P. Will after working with him, now going on for 2 years, and says, hey, he ain't got it, I would trust that if I was Arturas Karnisovas. If that's what's saying, I would trust that. And you got to see what you can get at that point in time. P. Will for G.G. Jackson. But the thing is that you got to keep in mind, they got to match the contract. Oh, hold up. Rewind. The Detroit Pistons have $14 million in cap space. Meaning that if they were to make a trade for P. Will, they would only have to send out $6 million at the minimum. Right? They can send out more to save more, but they'll send out $6 million and you can get P. Will back. Now, I know they're going to be probably more protective of their first round picks, but I tell you what, I'm definitely calling the Detroit Pistons. They're a young team. They reportedly were looking for an athletic wing to pair with what they already have going on down there. If I'm the Bulls, I'm also calling the Detroit Pistons. Now, the downside of that is that if he ends up developing for the Detroit Pistons, we got to see him 4 times a year. But with the Pistons having $14 million in cap space, I'm calling the Pistons as well. I'm calling them as well. They may be willing to absorb that, some of that. Oh, listen, and right as I'm saying that, top Ice Cube game. I promise you, I didn't see your comment before I said that. But great point there. Great point there. With this news coming out tonight, tomorrow's game against the Trailblazers just got even more interesting. We'll see who's starting tomorrow. Well, see, that's another. Well, I guess if you're looking to try to shop P. Will, you're probably going to leave him in the starting lineup, right? You're not going to bench him while you're trying to shop him. That will actually hurt, right? Now, if you start getting into advanced talks and you don't want to risk him getting hurt, then you'll sit him. But I think at this point, if the Bulls are truly ready to start shopping P. Will, you're probably going to keep starting him. You're probably going to keep starting him to see what you have in him, and we'll see what you can go on with that. Whole lot of bull. Plus, Detroit has had interest in Pat before. There you go. There you go. Camille, P. Will succeeding in Detroit at the cost of playing in Detroit. I mean, you know what? He may keep his house in Chicago at that point and just drive the 3 hours, right? Would you take back Tim Hardaway Jr. as an expiring $16 million from Detroit? If you're taking back expiring like a Tim Hardaway Jr., you got to get a first round pick. It doesn't necessarily have to be this year's, and I'll look at what the Spurs have to offer. But I think at that point, you got to at least get a top 10 protected pick or something back. If you're taking back that type of contract of Tim Hardaway Jr., they got to sweeten the pot with the pick, because they're not going to probably give up any of their young guys because they're a young developing team. But hey, I'm not mad at it. Let's see what they have to offer. So Detroit can't trade their own first round pick until 2029. So that would be the first pick that the Detroit Pistons can offer. So if the Pistons are saying, hey, we'll take P. Will off your hands, we'll send you Tim Hardaway Jr., who expires, so you're clearing the rest of the years on P. Will's contract. We'll give you the 2029 first round pick, top 5 protected just in case. I'm open to having that conversation. I'm open to having that conversation. I think if you bench P. Will, you must officially announce he's available. Yeah, but then I agree with that. But at the same time, I just think you run a risk of the last thing you want to do is call a team. You'd be like, you're calling us on the guy you just benched. Like, you don't want to give him that leverage, right? If anything, if I know I'm about to start shopping P. Will for the next 2-3 games, I'm running sets for P. Will. I'm giving P. Will every opportunity to go out there and take some shots, right? We're trying to up that trade value. So getting off his horrible contract is enough. It could be. I can see where you're coming from with that. I'd rather get fleeced by another team. I don't want to get fleeced by OKC again. I feel you on that one. As Detroit put picks on the table for anyone recently, Portland seems like likely to me, like my earlier comment. Yes, remember the Detroit Pistons they've already been said that they are open to adding something. They want to add something at the trade deadline. They feel comfortable with Cade is. They feel comfortable with where the team is. They want to add something at the trade deadline. Initially, earlier in the season, they were open to absorbing contracts into their $14 million, absorbing bad contracts to get picks. But it shifted I think this was reported about a week ago by Mark Stein, is that the Pistons are looking to add at the trade deadline. So that actually can make some sense. That can make some sense there. Man, I just feel like that dog should be in you no matter. He's just soft, bro. Can't keep making excuses. Who's make any? Oh, you must be talking to somebody else. Because I agree with you. Like, at some point, you got to stop thinking that you can put something in somebody that's not there. That's a questionable line there. It's a questionable line. So, but yeah, I think at some point you just got to realize somebody just doesn't have it. And P. Will's one of those guys that unfortunately it just seems like he just doesn't have it. How many conversations have we had? Like, I remember people were like, oh, P. Will just needs to work with dribble too much in the offseason, and then that'll fix his dribble. He's worked with dribble too much the last 3 years, and nothing's gotten better. Oh, if DeMar just leaves, he can get better. DeMar's gone. He hasn't got any better. At some point, you just got to realize maybe you're just not the situation that P. Will can thrive and develop in. And it seems like the Bulls are getting to that point. This is what it is, man. But once again, like I said, the Bulls only get so much credit for this because once again, you're a year behind everybody else in the evaluation of this. Exactly. P. Will got nobody to blame but himself. So, hey, I mean, but we'll see where this goes. Ultimately, all I can say is if the Bulls are able to find, and it's still if they move off from Patrick Williams, if they're able to move off of him, get something back and get some type of expiry, even if the contract goes 2 years, right? And you come off the last 2 years of P. Will's deal and save on that. That could be Io. That could be Kobe, right? That could be the difference between being able to save re-sign those guys. So I'm glad that AK seems to have finally caught up. It's a little bit too late, like everything is, but P. Will still has tons of potential. I want to be clear here. He still has tons of potential, but sometimes players just need a change of scenery, and maybe, just maybe, the Bulls are starting to get to that point where they feel the same way, that people just needs that change of scenery, and that maybe Chicago's not the place that he's going to hit his potential at. We've seen it happen with like Gafford, right? We've seen it happen there when Wendell's still kind of Wendell to me, but he's played better on a different team. So we'll see what happens there. But thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. Thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.